London looks like a city of success. It's the capital of the United Kingdom, one of the richest cities on earth, with an economy worth more than $500 billion. If London were a country, it would rank among the top 30 economies in the world, close to nations like Norway. For centuries, it's been the heart of Europe's financial power, a place that symbolized opportunity, innovation, and wealth. But behind the skyline and the luxury lies a story most people don't see. Because right now, Britain's wealth is only skin deep. In 2023, councils in London revealed a shocking figure. More than 1 in 50 people in the city are homeless. That's a rise of over 50% in just a decade, making the UK home to the highest rate of homelessness in the developed world. At the same time, real wages, the money people actually take home after inflation, haven't grown for over 15 years. In other words, people are earning the same as they did back in 2008, but paying double or even triple for basic things like food, energy, and rent. So it's no surprise that more and more people are walking away from the UK entirely. From doctors and engineers to teachers and tech professionals, thousands of Britain's brightest are leaving every year. The country that once attracted the world's talent can no longer keep its own. And the reason goes far beyond money. This is the story of how a nation that once ruled the world ended up losing faith in itself. It's the story of why no one wants to live in the UK anymore. Every year, more young and skilled British workers pack their bags and leave. They move to places like New York, Sydney, and Toronto, cities where their talents are valued and their paychecks actually stretch. A junior professional in New York can earn more than double what they'd make in London, while living costs are only about 1/3 higher. That simple math says it all. In Britain, people work hard and still can't afford a decent life. In other countries, they can work the same hours and actually live. The problem is even worse inside the public sector. Doctors, nurses, and teachers, people who form the backbone of society, are burning out and giving up. The National Health Service, once a global model of free healthcare, is now losing its best staff faster than it can replace them. Many of them are moving to Australia, New Zealand, or Canada, where they can earn more and work under less pressure. And it's not just about money. It's about dignity, stability, and the simple hope that their work actually means something. Ironically, as more British citizens leave, immigration numbers keep rising. More people from outside the UK are moving in than ever before, often to fill the very roles that British workers are abandoning. But there's a catch. The people leaving tend to be highly skilled, while many of those arriving take up low-paying jobs. The result is a slow brain drain, where the country's talent and innovation quietly disappear. It's a paradox that says everything about modern Britain, a nation importing workers but exporting its future. And to understand why this keeps happening, we need to look at what living in the UK actually feels like today. When you look beyond London's skyline, the picture of modern Britain starts to crumble. If you remove London's economy from the equation, the rest of the UK would rank lower in living standards than Mississippi, the poorest state in the United States. That's how wide the gap has grown between Britain's image and its reality. Back in 2007, the average British household was only 8% worse off than its European neighbors. But in the 15 years since, that gap has exploded to 20%. At this pace, the average family in Slovenia or Poland will soon be better off than the average British household. For a country that once defined modern progress, this is a shocking reversal. The pain isn't shared equally either. While the top earners in the UK still live comfortably, ranking among the highest in Europe, the middle class has been squeezed and the poorest have been crushed. The wealthiest 5% rank 5th in Europe for living standards. But the poorest 5%? They rank 15th, below countries once considered far behind, like Slovenia. Everyday life tells the same story. People are paying record prices for rent, food, and transport, yet earning almost the same as they did 15 years ago. The dream of owning a home has become a fantasy for anyone without family wealth. And for many young people, the UK now feels like a treadmill that never stops moving, just faster and harder every year. It's not just an economic problem anymore, it's an emotional one. People feel like no matter how hard they work, they're falling further behind. And nothing captures that better than the next crisis shaping daily life in Britain: the housing disaster. The housing crisis in the UK isn't new, but it's never been this bad. For most young people, the dream of owning a home has turned into a cruel joke. Prices have skyrocketed far beyond what the average salary can reach, and even renting has become a financial nightmare. Entire generations now live paycheck to paycheck, not because they're careless, but because the system has left them behind. The roots of this crisis go back decades. In the late 1970s, the government introduced the Right to Buy scheme, allowing people in public housing to purchase their homes at discounted rates. It sounded like a brilliant idea until those homes were sold and never replaced. Over time, the stock of social housing shrank by about 25%, while the population kept growing. Today, there are 1.4 million fewer social homes in England than there were in 1980. That shortfall has forced millions of people into the private rental market, where competition is brutal and prices climb year after year. Rising demand and limited supply have made landlords the real winners. Renters, meanwhile, face small spaces, rising costs, and almost no stability. It's now common to spend half your income just to keep a roof over your head. And when you add stagnant wages to that equation, people are left with nothing to save, no safety net, no future. The divide between generations has never been clearer. Older homeowners, many of whom own multiple properties, have seen their wealth grow effortlessly. Meanwhile, young adults struggle to even imagine buying their first home. This growing inequality has created two Britons, one that owns everything and one that rents forever. And when a nation can't house its own people, the consequences don't just stop there. Because when housing becomes impossible, the next step is something far worse: homelessness. The homelessness crisis in the United Kingdom has reached levels no one imagined possible for a country this wealthy. Behind every statistic lies a story of families pushed out, children displaced, and lives slowly falling apart. In 2010, around 48,000 households in England were living in temporary accommodation. By 2023, that number had more than doubled to 112,000, the highest on record. These temporary homes are often unfit for living. Many are riddled with mold, damp walls, insects, and rodent infestations. Families are shuffled from one place to another, often with just days' notice. Children are pulled out of school, parents lose jobs, and entire lives unravel in the process. The constant uncertainty destroys any chance of stability or progress. Local councils are stretched thin, spending nearly £2 billion a year just to keep people off the streets. That's money meant for community development now spent on emergency shelter. But these shelters aren't solutions. They're survival. And even that safety net is shrinking as budgets tighten and demand grows. The root causes are painfully clear. Not enough homes are being built. Social housing has nearly vanished. Financial support for renters has been eroded. It's a perfect storm that traps people in poverty and makes social mobility almost impossible. For young people, the picture is even bleaker. Many of them now spend their 20s and 30s renting overpriced rooms or living with parents, unable to save for the future. Meanwhile, older generations continue to profit from rising property values, widening the gap between the secure and the struggling. It's a vicious cycle. Less housing leads to higher rent leads to debt, and debt leads to homelessness. And when so many people are struggling just to survive, the idea of a better Britain starts to sound like a memory. But housing isn't the only system collapsing. Even the one thing the British once took the most pride in, the National Health Service, is now falling apart before their eyes. The National Health Service was once the pride of Britain. It was built on a simple promise: that every citizen, no matter their wealth, could access free health care. For decades, the NHS stood as a symbol of compassion and equality, admired around the world. But today, that promise is slipping away. In just 9 years, the number of people waiting for NHS treatment has skyrocketed from 3 million to over 7 million. For many patients, that means waiting months or even years to see a specialist. Hospitals are overcrowded, staff are overworked, and morale is at an all-time low. For those on the front lines, doctors, nurses, and paramedics, it's become a daily struggle just to keep the system from collapsing. Ironically, the NHS now has more funding and staff than ever before. Since 2019, its budget has risen by more than 10%, and the number of senior doctors and nurses has grown. But none of that seems to help. Why? Because the system is sinking under the weight of deeper problems. An aging population demands more care every year. Medical treatments and technologies are more expensive. Drug prices are soaring. And after years of high inflation, staff wages must rise just to keep up. The NHS is caught in a vicious cycle, spending more just to stand still. Even with record funding, the results are getting worse. Survival rates for cancer, heart disease, and stroke are lower than in most developed nations. Hospitals are short on beds, outdated in equipment, and behind on technology. Money that should go toward long-term improvements is instead spent on patching daily emergencies. And the people who rely on the NHS most are the ones paying the highest price. This isn't just about healthcare anymore. It's a reflection of a country that can no longer manage its own success. And nowhere is that clearer than in the state of its infrastructure. The crumbling roads, abandoned rail projects, and endless government U-turns that define modern Britain. Every country has failed projects, but in the UK, failure has become the norm. Nothing captures that better than the story of HS2. It was supposed to be a high-speed rail network connecting the north and south of England. A bold plan to modernize transport and boost regional growth. Instead, it turned into a decade-long disaster. The cost ballooned from £37 billion to over £100 billion. Construction dragged on for years, and in the end, most of the project was scrapped. It became the perfect symbol of how Britain manages progress: slow, expensive, and unfinished. The same story repeats across the country. Roads filled with potholes, train strikes disrupting travel, and public transport systems that fall apart with the slightest pressure. Every upgrade takes longer and costs more than expected. Even small projects are delayed by endless bureaucracy, planning restrictions, and political infighting. It's not just inefficiency, it's paralysis. Then came Brexit, which only deepened the cracks. Leaving the European Union was meant to restore independence and control. Instead, it reduced trade, increased costs, and made it harder for British businesses to compete. The UK now trades less with its largest market, struggles with worker shortages, and faces weaker growth than almost any other developed country. But here's the truth. Britain's decline didn't start with Brexit. That was just the final blow to a system already crumbling. The real cause lies in decades of short-term thinking. Governments obsessed with short political wins neglected long-term investment. Critical infrastructure was privatized, underfunded, or simply ignored. Private companies focused on profit instead of public good, and now the entire country is paying for it. Britain once built railways that connected the world. Now it struggles to maintain its own. And while its leaders talk about innovation, its citizens are stuck in gridlock, both literally and economically. So how did it come to this? To understand the fall, we have to look back at the time when everything seemed to be going right, the decade Britain still can't stop missing. There was a time when Britain felt unstoppable. The 1990s were more than just another decade. They were an identity. The Cool Britannia era gave the world Oasis, the Spice Girls, and a new sense of pride that echoed from London to Liverpool. The economy was booming. Optimism was everywhere. And people genuinely believed that Britain's best days were ahead. After a rough start in the early 90s, the country entered its longest stretch of uninterrupted growth since World War II. From 1992 to 2008, the UK's economy expanded every single year. The financial sector flourished. Foreign investment poured in and wages were rising. For a while, it seemed like the country had finally cracked the code: stability, prosperity, and confidence all at once. But beneath the surface, a quiet problem was taking root. Britain was becoming a service-based economy, shifting away from manufacturing and industry. This made the economy look rich on paper, but it hollowed out jobs for millions of working-class families. Entire towns built around steel, mining, or shipbuilding were left behind as factories shut down. The wealth stayed in the cities, while the countryside began to fade. When the global financial crisis hit in 2008, the illusion shattered overnight. The same financial sector that powered the boom now dragged the whole country into recession. Growth stalled, wages froze, and inequality soared. The government's solution was austerity, cutting spending to reduce debt, but those cuts hit the poorest communities hardest. Hospitals, schools, and transport systems all suffered, while the financial elite bounced back. That's when the dream of the 90s truly ended. The optimism, the energy, and the sense of unity that defined the era never returned. What came next was a slow realization that the country people once believed in no longer worked for them. And now, decades later, Britain is still paying the price for those lost years of short-term gains and long-term neglect. But this story isn't just about the past. It's about where the country is heading next. Because if the 90s were a symbol of hope, today's Britain has become a warning. The United Kingdom was once a place people dreamed of living in. It offered stability, free healthcare, and the promise that if you worked hard, you could build a better life. But that promise has quietly slipped away. Behind the polished image of London lies a country weighed down by inequality, broken systems, and decades of neglect. Wages have frozen, prices have soared, and the gap between the rich and the poor has stretched beyond repair. Homes have turned into investments instead of shelter, hospitals are overcrowded, and public services crumble under the weight of bureaucracy. For millions, the UK no longer feels like home. It feels like survival. What makes it worse is that this didn't happen overnight. It's the result of years of decisions made for profit, not progress. A generation that once thrived is now watching their children struggle just to stay afloat. The optimism of the 1990s has been replaced by a quiet resignation, a sense that the country has lost its direction, and so people are leaving. Not because they want to abandon Britain, but because they can't see a future in it anymore. They're choosing stability abroad over struggle at home, opportunity over nostalgia. It's a painful truth, but one the country can't ignore forever. Because the real question isn't just why people are leaving. It's why those in power are pretending everything is fine. Until that changes, the United Kingdom will keep losing the very thing that once made it great: its people.